Anybody hungry? Yes. Oh my God, everyone is so hungry now. So welcome, and of course what you just saw was a film produced by Stuart and his crew at the Anchovy Bar, but not just the Anchovy Bar. And it's been, of course, circling around the humble anchovy, proving that an anchovy can be something of the most delicious you could actually eat. And Stuart, you're here with us now, live at the Expo 2020 in Dubai, in the Swedish pavilion. It's around dinner time, and we are so hungry here. It's a big honor to have you here, by the way, when we're discussing the next-gen food system I'm going to talk about today. But Stuart, let me start by asking you, tell us a bit about yourself and your quest within the world of gastronomy before we dig into the anchovies.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. I hope you can hear me. Fantastic. Well, thank you, Johan, for inviting me to this important discussion. You know, certainly my wife and I have been chefs for the past 30 years. And, you know, we trained throughout the country and a bit in Europe as well. You know, and about 10 years ago, we ventured out onto our own to open our first restaurant, which is called Statebird Provisions. And the idea of that restaurant, you know, was to really solve the small plates dilemma in San Francisco and in the US. And, you know, we came up with a clever concept of incorporating kind of the Chinese dim sum experience with California cuisine. And what we found in our cooking at that time is that we sort of had freedom and flexibility in cooking unlike any restaurant that we've ever cooked in and served, where we didn't need a traditional menu anymore. And what that opened up for us, and we didn't realize this until a few months into it, is by the residue of design, we were able to use every bit and bobble and make something amazing, put it on a tray, it looked delicious, put a price tag along with it, and sell it. So that meant that every radish that came in through the door, every turnip top that we could turn into some sort of braised greens with a unique sauce, or you know, really, quite frankly, small fish, right? Where, you know, sometimes it's a little difficult. And, you know, if you have a few orders left, it doesn't go into waste or into family meal, or, you know, you can still produce food with it that feeds people, but also that, you know, respects the ingredient. And so we sort of built our whole restaurant little world by this philosophy, and, you know, kind of anchovy by anchovy or quail by quail, we sort of, you know, laid the foundation within our cooking based on this idea of very little waste or zero waste, and yeah, we're able to make it scale.
Well, that's amazing. I mean, like, this feels so far away from the stuffy old school cooking that you can possibly come, right?
Absolutely, yes. I mean, it's very interactive. It's very sort of levels the playing field. We still work with the ingredients that, you know, we've always worked with, whether it was fine dining or not fine dining. I mean, you know, we're using the same ingredients that our 3-star Michelin restaurants are using, and, you know, have developed relationships with our farmers over the course of, you know, really the past 20 years that my wife and I have been cooking in San Francisco, where we grew up. And, you know, I don't see that, you know, ingredients are no longer the defining factor of what makes a great restaurant, right? Or a fine dining restaurant. we're all using the same ingredients. It's now the cooking and it's the environment and it's the playfulness, I think, of the restaurants that really define kind of the next generation of how we eat.
But also the attitude. I'm like, you seem to come from a more like a philosophy of sustainability here, and then without the sustainability thinking, you probably, it feels like you wouldn't be cooking unless it would be sustainable in a sense. Am I right?
I would agree. Something changed in the early 2000s, I think, for me as a chef, but also I think in the world of food, it was slowly changing. And San Francisco, of course, is kind of the epicenter of where a lot of food changes. And I wouldn't say trends, but sort of more philosophical ideas, right? I feel like in the old days, when I first started cooking, it was conceptualizing a dish, and then it was ordering food for that idea. No matter where it came from, that was kind of the concept. And that was really current in American gastronomy. And, when we started to lay roots in San Francisco and call this place home, it really started to, over the course of about 2 years, work the other way around, where it was go to the market, find the ingredients, and let the ingredients sort of determine what the dish was going to be. So sometimes you would come back with no, from the farmer's market, and you had an intention, and that completely got derailed because the quality of other ingredients started to really play out the dish. And so we really kind of listened to the produce, so to speak, right? Let the produce, let the stories, let the philosophy of the farmer, and kind of really have an important important premise in our own cooking.
Yeah, no. So this is super cool, because we've had this discussion, me and my friends at Sweden Food Tech, many times about the role of the chef is, of course, as an interpreter of the ingredients. But also, I get the sense here that what you're trying to raise here is also the value of the producer here, by making sure that the produce is as fresh as possible. And anchovy, you said that this was a big revelation to you when you went from a certain amount of hours to basically no hours at all, and you said that really changed the notion of the ingredient itself.
Yeah, I would say anchovies have played a significant role in my cooking, not only because of their taste, but the logistics of how the anchovies arrive in our kitchen, that are arriving within 2 hours of being harvested from the ocean. All of a sudden you start to take that idea and you say, I want more of this. I want not only for my anchovies, but for our whole animals, right? For the produce in which how do we get a peach in the middle of summer when it's perfect? How do we get that to the table in a timely fashion where we're going to still represent the integrity of that ingredient? And so that's sort of like, anchovies to me they're sort of the Yoda of food, so to speak, right? They just have, they require a certain amount of work, and you've got to work in this small window, and the results are going to be extraordinary. And I think what is really impressive is that there is an audience for foods that are revered, like anchovies, obviously, but also anchovies in America, they're feared. They're feared more than they're revered. I know this sounds strange. We just don't have a culture of eating small fish. And honestly, most people don't even recognize that we have anchovies that are coming from our own backyard in the Bay Area. I mean, these are caught right around Alcatraz, for example, right under the Golden Gate Bridge. I mean, these are iconic Bay Area landmarks, and these are in our backyard as well. That's where they're setting the nets that you saw in the video.
But it's cool. But when you talk about anchovies and being, they can be found in the middle of the city. And I guess anchovies are also one of the fish stocks that aren't super depleted either.
Well, as Eric Sandquist, who's the anchovy fisherman in the Bay Area, he says that I can go out and catch you as many anchovies as you want, and there would still be plenty more out there. We talk about this quite frequently as an ongoing theme. Is the anchovy bar represents a restaurant that tries to look at the ocean and find net positive solutions, right? Things like oysters, clams, mussels, anchovies, sardines, herring. We have a very short herring season here, and we really try to put them high on the pedestal. And then what we do is we really look at them as the trophy fish. But in the States, and in much of the world, we have such high regard for things like bluefin tuna, which of course are completely overfished, salmon stocks, cod stocks. These are the trophy fish. And what we're trying to do is that we're representing the bait fish, right? The working man's fish. I mean, this is something when you're in Sicily, you see these small boats the size of a Fiat, that are coming back, and they've got a handful of different varieties and species, and none of these are the trophy fish. These are the smaller bait fish that are much lower on the food chain, that are also high in populations, right?
Yeah, no, I think it's super. But what will happen with anchovies now? Will they suddenly become this trophy fish that's super expensive and extreme luxury? Says I remember, I think it was Dan Barber who started to cook. I can't remember the name in English now for this fish that was really ground living fish that was bycatch, and suddenly they started to cook it, and prices went from $1 a kilo to ridiculous amounts.
Yeah, of course. I mean, anytime that you create like this eat it to save it mentality, or it becomes popular, and we will see some spike. I mean, I know Eric, our fisherman, he sells about 15 years ago, it was about 85% of his catch went specifically to bait fish. So sport fishermen, and then all the local fishing fleet that would go out and catch halibut, salmon, cod, rock cod, etc. from our waters, they would pull up, they scoop out the fresh anchovies, and then go out and fish. And so that was 15% was actually going to the diner, right? To the restaurant in San Francisco. And now he's up to, and I since we've been working together, and I've been really promoting anchovies over the last few years, I mean, he's up to 35%. 35% is now hitting the tables in San Francisco during the season, which is pretty cool. And we're really proud of that. That's been a lot of work.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So, but tell me, when did your love affair with anchovies start? Because you said you've been doing anchovies for a while before you started getting them super fresh.
Yeah. Well, I think everybody, you've got to have an anchovy introduction, right? What's your entry dish? And for me, Caesar salad was my entry dish, and I just loved the dressing. I didn't really know much about anchovies, and this is when I was, my teenage years. I didn't myself, when I returned to the Bay Area to start really planting my roots as a chef here, I didn't really know that we had a local anchovy either. And this is 2004, right? And, I remember just ordering anchovies from my fishmonger, right? And you know, the quality being some days good, some days kind of blown out bellies, a little more, you know, intense in aroma. And as you saw the video, obviously we changed the logistics of anchovies, how we receive them. But you know, I fell in love with them kind of at first bite when I, you know, started to fry them up in a pan just to eat them. And you know, I've always sort of been the type of person that champions the I guess the underdog, right? I find a lot of satisfaction in my own world, you know, to truly champion things that are difficult. You know, perhaps that's my own personal boulder I'm pushing up the mountain. You know, they are a lot of work, as you see, but the rewards are so significant. And I think, you know, I mean, I've been making that recipe of the pickled anchovies now for almost 15 years, that exact same recipe. What's improved is the logistics and the protocol that we've set in place. And that's solidified. And, you know, and last year we opened up the anchovy bar, which is kind of an ode to this little fish. And I guess that I'm just blown away by the love that, you know, people seem to have for this fish. It's impressive. It's impressive.
Yep, cool. So you've opened up a door apparently to something that's fundamental in man. You know, you want to associate yourself with the food of your ancestors and the local ingredient. It seems to taste
Absolutely.
better actually.
I couldn't agree more. It tastes better. I think local is the best way, right? You know, when you can work with somebody local, you know, something that we, you know, in our quest for continued, you know, building of our philosophy in the restaurants is, you know, I have a few sayings, and one of them is that, you know, food always tastes better when you know the first name of the person who grew it or ranched it or fished it. And I truly believe that, you know, because there is an identity to the food and the person who sowed the seed, watered it, and really worked with the seasons through you know, thick and thin, right? Whether it's weather or, you know, challenges in labor or whatever it is, to get that food to the market or to get that food, you know, to fish it out of the ocean. You know, I truly believe that when you know the first name of that producer, right, of the person whose hands sowed the seed, that food is going to taste extraordinary. That's a big part of it, and I think it's also kind of a mindfulness of your region and your connection to your own food system, right?
Right. I mean, like we're talking about food systems here, of course, and it makes you think in a couple of different directions. One of them is, of course, that when you talk about sensations of the freshness of the anchovy, when you really taste them fresh out of the water compared to, you know, if they've gone through an industrial process, it you know, makes you think that, okay, so industrial processes, they cannot represent food at all, really,
Mm.
if we're going to do see it from the taste side at least.
You know, I think that, you know, scalability requires industrial processes, but what I think that constantly, you know, for me as a chef, I have to always ask, what are we sacrificing? And, you know, we have to create these pillars of quality measures. And I think really last on the list there is profitability. It should be not even part of the conversation. It needs to be, of course, we know this. But what it really needs is it integrity to ingredient, the story in which what you're telling that connects people to food, right? You know, and then also I think that you have to question how important or how scalable does this ingredient need to be, right? I think that there is kind of a cap, and how do you find the economics of scale equalized with the integrity of the ingredient, which does take in mind environmental practices. It does take in mind, equality in pay for its labor. It produces jobs, which I think is also very important. And, ultimately it represents its origin, right? It represents the place in which it came from. These to me are just absolutely imperative to the continuation of a historical, a traditional food system, and also allows you to think about what the future of that food system is, because you've built on such a great base.
Yeah. So basically, but what you've proven here is that you can take anchovies from nothing to 35% of it at least being not baked these days,
Yes.
and that also is a testament to the power of the chef, right? So when you can prove what the true worth of an ingredient is, the world will follow.
Yes.
So where do you see the roles of chefs in the future?
What do I think the roles of the chef? So that's a great question. What I've noticed in the last 10 years is that the chef's role, especially when you start to I have 3 kitchens, 3 restaurants now, and we've got a team of about, through those about 40 to 50 chefs, of line cooks and young cooks entering this industry. What I have noticed is that when you champion an ingredient such as an anchovy, and that's the starting point of a cook who's just starting their career at 20 years old, they're going to take that philosophy. You're planting that seed in that cook. Now, multiply that 40 times over just in my restaurants, right? And just think about how that's going to spray out in the next, 20 years. I can just see my own growth over the last 20 years and what has changed in my own cooking and the environment and, the diets of people and how much my cooking has evolved. And I just think about like the starting point that these young chefs are in right now and what they're able to do and how they're going to broadcast that information is unreal. So I think in the next 20 years, that's going to totally change. But also the diners. So we cook, our restaurants every night where, at the end of it, it's about 400 to 500 diners who are experiencing our food over three different restaurants that share these values. And so I think that the diners are eating this food. They're recognizing the flavors, the production, the handmade approach to this food, and they're going to desire that more and more and more, right? I think it's just constantly planting seeds and watering and having a strong philosophy really, really is imperative to being a chef right now in 2022. You have to come with an environmental philosophy, a political philosophy. You have to think, you're every bite you make, everything you put in your mouth is a political statement of some sort, right? Whether you're choosing to eat organics, you're choosing to eat small, local, sustainable, or you're going big ag, right? So, you have that power. Your dollars matter, right? And you see that more and more as a chef.
I think that's a lovely way to see it. Now, this might be a strange analogy, but I've been thinking about the future because, of course, we cannot consume in the way we're currently consuming in the world.
Yes.
So what can we consume in the world? Well, we can consume stuff that grows back, anchovies, plants, stuff like that. So essentially, aren't we seeing a tremendous shift? This is, of course, a leading question towards us spending more and more on the food experiences. And when we spend more and more on those, we need to expand our food universe into things that we haven't been eating before. Because, after all, 75% of our calories come from 12 grains or 12 plants and 5 animals. And it's roughly 200 products or so that we're growing. But suddenly you're proving to us that something that's outside the normal, so to say, food universe can come in and become something else. So,
Yes,
so
yeah.
what do you say about the future?
Well, I can tell you what we don't need is we don't need a lab-grown anchovy. I'm just going to say that right now. What we need is that we need to accept, I mean, I think that, we as a society, as definitely first world societies, we consume a lot of food. We eat a lot of, a lot of meat, we kind of just consume. We just consume. I still feel that, if we can consume our food with more of a connectivity to food, I think that there's, I live in a bubble in San Francisco, and, the mantra here is that, know thy farmer is a pretty consistent statement here. And I think that, it's a difficult thing to think about the future. It's a scary idea, but I do feel if you look to the past and you find connection with tradition and the hard work that the food system ideally has been built on, that you can really make good choices for the future. And it doesn't mean that you can't eat meat, right? It doesn't mean that you have to just eat plant-based diet, but it does mean that you need to make some changes too, right? And even in restaurants, we serve now easily 50% of our menus are vegetable based. 50%. Now that's a big change. We've cut out a lot of items. Anchovy bar may be the exception because we do work on these net positive, oysters, clams, anchovies. A good portion of that is still vegetables. But I think that, what I've learned is that a vegetable driven restaurant, even with meat, because I think it's got to be part of the conversation, it creates a real dynamic opportunity for people to enjoy your food. And the diversity is unbelievable. It's unbelievable what you can do with this. I think the future of food, it's consumerism. We need to consume less, but we also need more nutrients and extraction of things like protein in our diet. It's a complex question for sure.
It is, but you see it as a positive potential here for us to, through food, become more sustainable and healthy individuals, both as individuals and on a planetary level. Food is the solution, right?
Well, food is everything, right? I mean, we can't survive without food, period. We just can't. Food is our fuel, and what you choose to put in your body for fuel is imperative. And, I subscribe to this idea, and we need to really kind of just amplify this idea, is that you are what you eat eats. Absolutely. If you're going to eat food that is genetically modified or feedlot cattle, right, that are on steroids and all sorts of pharmaceuticals to keep them living, well, you're ingesting that into your own body. I mean, you look at the photos, you look at an animal that is living off of grassland, that is doing the work that, kind of animals and the environment can coexist in, and you eat this, it's gonna be different. It's definitely gonna be different, but but that you're eating something that has lived and ingested a pharmaceutical-free life, for lack of a better word, right? Because we don't need that in our lives. We just don't. We don't need to add more complexity when food is the solution, right? Food is medicine. Food is fuel. Food is delicious. Food is connectivity to cultures and tradition. And food is a labor of love. It requires work. It's just part of it. The idea of cooking in a kitchen, it just takes time, and it's an enjoyment. So, we understand these ideas of food. I think we're going to be a much happier society in the future.
Okay, I think those will have to be the most excellent final words I've ever heard in a session. Food as a way to a happier and more sustainable society. Thank you so much, Stuart, for coming and sharing your wisdom with us. And I encourage everyone here to travel in a sustainable way, of course, to the Anchovy Bar. Stand for as long as it takes in order to taste your dishes. Stuart, million thanks for joining us here today.
Well, thank you, Johan. And I look forward to a continued conversation.
We will, for sure. Okay, Stuart, take care. And to all of you here who have enjoyed our conversation around the future of food, let's face it, the humble ingredients out there might be the most excellently tasting ones. Thank you for joining. Bye for now. See you tomorrow.